What's up, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about a very crucial aspect of financial management for nonprofits, and that is cost allocation. And you know it's serious when I bring out what they say, the handy dandy notebook, but it's my handy dandy laptop, right? Because we have some crucial aspects and areas of cost allocation that I want us to go through. And so I wanted to make sure that we didn't forget anything. And so let's get started. First, let's clarify what cost allocation actually is. So simply put, cost allocation is the process of assigning your organization's indirect costs, often referred to as shared costs, across different programs and or funding sources. So think of things like utilities, rent, salaries, right? Areas where it's not so clear the direct area that these costs are attached to. Not only is this critical for financial reporting, but it's also a requirement most times for grants and funders. Let's talk about why allocation is important. So for one, it's honestly just a part of the accounting process, right? It's an accounting task, but also it's a key part in maintaining transparency and trust with your funders, because allocating costs, these indirect costs, appropriately allows you to present a more accurate picture of the programs that are being affected, of how funding sources are being shared across the organization's different programs and initiatives. And we want to be able to be as transparent as possible, right? That then affects like your audits, your grant reporting, and not to mention your organization's reputation, right? Because being able to be a good steward of funding that is given to you makes funders want to give more. Simply put, it ensures accurate financial reporting. It's necessary for audit readiness. It's critical for grant compliance, and it enhances transparency. All things that we like. Now, the first step in determining how to allocate costs is going to be, you need to, one, identify what those indirect costs typically are, right? And so you want to indicate, if it's rent, if it's utilities, if it's different program expenses, right? So sometimes organizations are buying, let's just say, things like supplies as a whole, but it gets disseminated across multiple programs, right? That's just a simple example. But then you have things like salaries where it can get a little bit more tricky. And so one, you want to indicate what are those costs that are indirect. Step two is going to be determining your allocation base. And this is where a lot of the work takes place. And this is where you really have to dig into what's going to be best for your organization, because typically it could be based on direct labor hours. It could be based off of, if you operate in an actual physical space, it could be based off of square footage, any other reasonable measure, right? As long as it's documented, it's reasonable, and it makes sense for your organization. Step three of that is actually the process of allocating costs to programs and activities. And so one of the things we do very simply is that if we have salaries that have to be allocated across different programs, we typically will create like a payroll allocation spreadsheet, so that we're not trying to do this math and guess every time payroll is run how these costs get split across like the different programs or funding sources. And so once you have your allocation base, you want to create a document, so your cost allocation methodology that's documented, but then you also want to create, whether it's like supplemental schedules, right, that help you to actually allocate these costs at the very least every single month when you're closing the books. The last step is reviewing and adjusting regularly, right? And so you want to, especially as you get different funding sources, especially as things become more complex, you want to make sure that you're reviewing your cost allocation system regularly, right? Regularly, because programs change over time. How your organization is being funded changes over time. And so you want to make sure that the allocation reflects those changes. So for example, if you're using square footage as a base and you allocate rent and utilities based on the amount of space, right? Actual space each program uses, okay, that makes sense. But what if you introduce a new program? That allocation needs to shift. Or what if you do some kind of mass hiring and you need to switch from using square footage as an allocation base to using the number of full-time employees, right? And so you want to make sure that as part of, your review process, you're thinking about whether or not the cost allocation methodology you're using still makes sense for where your organization is currently. Now, the last part we're going to talk about is some of the challenges that comes with having to allocate these, right? So the first one is kind of probably the writings on the wall with this one is how do you choose the right allocation base, right? Or making sure you choose the right allocation base. I'm not gonna lie, it can be tricky. And this is going to be one of those situations where it depends. It really does, right? The size of the organization, the complexity, do you have, a significant number of indirect costs? Like, it really is going to be tricky, and it depends. And my advice is to start simple and refine as you go, right? You want to make sure that you are consulting not only with your fiscal team, but also program directors, right? Because they're going to have insight into the grants that are funding their programs. Some grants are very specific. And so you have to consider all things before then going and determining what that allocation base is actually going to be. The second challenge is keeping up with the changes, because man, I can tell you as an outsourced accounting team, it is very difficult a lot of times to keep up, because the minute a new grant is introduced, or a new funding source or a new program, we kind of have to go back to square one and readjust based off of these new things. And that can happen quite often, right? Because as an organization, you're consistently kind of looking for funds. You're almost always fundraising, right? It can be a bit time consuming. However, what I will say is that if you start with a really good base, a lot of times when you have to go back, you're not necessarily starting from scratch. You're going back, you're starting from experience, but then you're also kind of adjusting what's already there. All right, and the last challenge, honestly, is getting buy-in, right? Because you can't do it alone. And a lot of times you need information that comes from different sources in order to create the right method for your organization. And so it's important to have clear communication and training to make sure everyone is on board and everyone understands what needs to happen. Because prime example is if you're going off of, time spent, right, from these full-time equivalents, let's just say time spent on these programs, that means that there has to be a very strict time tracking system in place to determine how much time individuals are spending on any one particular program if you're going based off of that, right? So there just has to be clear communication. It can't just live in fiscal, right? It has to be, everyone has to do their part in this case. So yeah, so that's kind of what you need to be thinking of and where you need to be starting if you don't have a cost allocation method in place, or if you have one, but it's been some time before, since you've actually looked at it and reviewed it and made sure that it made sense for your organization. Now, I hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions specifically about a method or anything that I've discussed here, then please drop it in the comments below. And if you have any videos that you want to see us put out, we are creating our schedule as we're heading into the fall and winter months on videos that we want to be helpful to you. We have the Accounting for Good community, right? Which is where you can get hands-on access, be in a community with your peers, right? Or most likely more so first time or new executive directors who really are looking to strengthen their knowledge as it relates to fiscal management, who's looking to build a solid fiscal foundation for their organization. And so if that sounds like you, then definitely come join us in the community. And if not, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.